Now, I know that's a challenging statement. I know that that makes us feel uncomfortable. But I believe this not just because I've been able to visit these places and talk to all these people, but I also believe this because I'm the owner of 2 teenagers. These are my kids. This is Tucker, who's 16. He's a junior in high school. That's my daughter, Tess, who just graduated from high school in June. This is one of the very few pictures we have of my kids in close proximity when they're not tearing each other apart. It's nice for me to be reminded that those moments exist. What I've found in their 22 collective years of both public and private education is that the learning that they do on their own looks very different from the learning that they do in schools. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that kind of comparison is important for us to think about. My wife wanted me to title this presentation, The Science of Kale and Basketball Math. And the reason she thought that would be a good idea is because these are the things that my kids have a passion for right now. My daughter is probably the healthiest, fittest person that I know. She is constantly engaged in communication with other people online, with other experts on what to eat, what to cook, what recipes there are, how to exercise. She basically has built a curriculum around health over the last 2 years with very little help from school. She was actually devastated a couple months ago when she learned there is such a thing as too much kale. Did you know that? You can have too much kale. My son, as you can see, is a basketball player. That's his passion. He loves to play basketball, and he has learned a great deal of math. In fact, I think he's probably learned more math that's going to serve him well in his life through his passion for basketball than the math that he's learning in school. He has a number of fantasy teams. He's constantly looking for statistics and predictive analysis on which people to draft, which players to keep. He is engaged in the box scores whenever teams are playing, and he's thinking hard about numbers in ways that are relevant to him and powerful in his life. A couple months ago, actually, we were watching an ESPN sports science segment where he learned that Steph Curry's shot has a much higher arc than LeBron James' shot, and that Steph Curry's shot, because of that, actually has 2 times the potential to go in the basket than LeBron's does. LeBron has to be really accurate. So Tucker, at that moment, went out in the driveway and started shooting a very high arc on his shot to the point where he actually had to cut some branches off the trees that were above the goal because he wanted to practice that. And it worked. He's been shooting and playing a lot better based on his knowledge of numbers. Now, basically, my kids live at a moment where they can learn about these things that they care about, whether it's kale or basketball or whatever else, because they live in a moment of abundance. They have abundant access to the sum of human knowledge, to 3.5 billion people, to almost 1 million apps and technologies that exist in the devices that they carry around in their pockets. And while this is an amazing thing, it's also a complex thing. They need different literacies, different skills to pretty much help them make sense of all of that abundance that they have available to them. But it does give them the opportunity to do what another one of my favorite authors calls productive learning. Seymour Saracen defines learning, productive learning, when it engenders wanting to learn more. When there's something that happens that we want to learn more about, that's when learning is really productive in our lives. And when we don't want to learn more, it's unproductive. And that really resonates for me. And I think it probably resonates for most of us that the things that we've learned most powerfully and deeply are the things that we want to learn more about. And so that's the reality that my kids live in. But the reality of school is that most of their learning has been unproductive, to be honest. Very rarely have they come home saying things like, I really want to learn more about this thing that we're talking about in school.